What the
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and Severance Season 2 and the season's finale answered a lot of our burning questions about the mysteries of Lumen, Mark and Gemma's place in Cold Harbor, and Lumen and Kier's ultimate goal of world domination. But despite all of those reveals, there are still a lot of unanswered questions that you guys have been sending me, and I wanted to address those with you right here, right now, and I'll do my best to answer them, but I am also going to get some help from my friends Pete and Jason a little later in the video. Now, some of the questions we're going to touch on are questions such as, was that Helly R in the finale, or was it Helena Egan once again pretending to be Helly? Where the hell did Bert send Irving? What files were the other MDRNEs working on, and who were those uncanny watchers? What was the point of us learning about Dieter, Kier's twin? And my favorite, where do these two idiots think they're going? I actually touched on that last one in our Severance Ending Explained video, where I also interviewed the man himself, Kier Egan, aka Mark Geller, but I want to hear what the ScreenCrush video analysis team has to say about the finale and the many unanswered questions that we still have going into Season 3, perhaps the final season of the show. And hey, be sure to check out our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com, where we have lots of great Severance-inspired merch. We have I completed Cold Harbor, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, the Hang In There, the Praise Kier sticky note shirt, and the Four Tempers in the classic Bohemian Rhapsody pose. Special shout out to my wife for designing all of our Severance merch, and hey, be sure to get yours now because these designs will be leaving the store soon, and hey, they might not be back for 3 years until we get Severance Season 3, haha, just kidding, Ben Stiller said it won't be 3 years, thank you. So one of the biggest questions / theories that I'm seeing floated right now is the question of, was that truly Helly R in the finale, or if it was Helena Egan once again pretending to be Helly R like earlier in the season. Matt of Myth on Twitter asked, was that really Helly or was it Helena? She did say, I am her. Now, this line about Helly saying that she's Helena is being used as proof that this is Helena Egan, not Helly R, and the look that Helly gives Gemma when Mark S chooses her and pulls her away to run deeper back into Lumen, people are saying that that look is confirmation that it was Helena. Some have described the look on her face as cruel and cite Irving's line from earlier in the season about Helly never being cruel, and this is leading people to believe that this was Helena Egan. I'm her. Now, as someone who was certain from the very first episode this season that Helena was pretending to be Helly, and of course we find out in episode 4 she was, I have to say, I'm not buying into this one. One, I just don't find the look that Helly gave Gemma to be a cruel look. That's not how I interpreted it. In fact, I read it as a look of like genuine pity. She feels bad for Gemma. And earlier in the episode when she says, I'm her, referring to Helena, I didn't take this to mean that it's actually Helena at the wheel in this moment. I took this as Helly accepting that the innies are their outies and her believing that there's really no future for her and no way out for any innie. And that is why she is pushing Mark S to embrace his outie and join his outie and Gemma and actually have a life, and in doing so she is also accepting that she is her outie and that she is destined to stay that way, seeing as Helena Egan will never undergo a process like reintegration. Therefore, Helly can never have a life outside of Lumen, but she is hopeful that Mark can. But as I theorized in our Ending Explained video, I think that that is why Helly R, not Helena, is actually on the path to becoming Lumen's new CEO in Season 3. I think that this shot of Mark and Helly literally running back into the arms of Lumen, as well as James Egan saying that he doesn't love Helena and how he sees Kier and Helly, that is all foreshadowing how James wants Helly, not Helena, to succeed him as CEO. James stomped Helena's tempers out of her, making her an obedient, bootlicking, eager to please corporate robot, while Helly R, like most innies, is more reminiscent of Helena as a child when she was rambunctious, defiant, rebellious, full of vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and wiles. Those, of course, being the 9 core principles of Lumen, and this was when she was more true to Kier. Now, here in a second, I want to talk about whether or not Helly is pregnant with twins, that is, and how the two separate sexual encounters that we saw this season between Helly and Mark and Helena and Mark tie into Woe's Hollow and the story of Dieter. All right, well, now I'm going to need some help answering the rest of all of your burning questions that were submitted to us on Twitter and in our community tab here on YouTube. Joining me, I have my My favorite, don't tell the others, Pete, my favorite ScreenCrush video analysis team member. We have Pete Fletzer from the SSW Network. We also have Jason Pargin, author. And Jason, I also wanted to take a minute to mention you are the author of I Am Starting to Worry About the Black Box of Doom. That is Ryan Airy's new obsession. He talks about it all the time. So I did want to take a moment to plug your book there, and we'll have a link in the description below for that. All right, guys. So I want to talk about this Severance finale. I want to answer some questions. But before we dive into that, I just want to ask, Jason, what were your thoughts on this finale?
You have to promise not to get mad. I thought the finale, as a piece of cinema on its own, was a miracle. You mentioned in the last video that final shot, you described it as art, like something that could be hung on a wall. I think you could take almost any frame of that finale and capture it and hang it on the wall as art. There's so much love and care put into this show. Every little thing, from the costumes and the framing of the shots and the lighting, the performances and the score and the comedy beats, everything is so beautifully made that on its own, it is an incredible achievement. As a resolution to 2 years worth of story, I thought it kind of revealed that the ongoing story is kind of a mess. And I think Severance is one of those shows where it works better as individual episodes than as an ongoing thing. But I will say that almost every great show you can probably say this about. If you sit down and watch Breaking Bad as one giant movie, it'd be like, all this happened in 2 years? That doesn't make sense. Right. So I get it, but I want to make it clear. I am a Severance super fan. I'm not a troll you've brought on. I am drinking out of the freaking Lumen mug that they said, if anything, I'm a shill. The reason I could go on and on about flaws is because this show invites that kind of overthinking. I can't do the same thing with Reacher. I can't name a second character in Reacher other than Reacher. And just now I forgot his first name.
Pete, you and I have talked a little bit in our previous videos, your thoughts on the finale, but how is it sitting with you? Because me personally, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it.
I've been able to stop thinking about it. I haven't been able to stop watching it. I was very happy that my wife actually fell asleep the first time she watched it with me, because that meant I had to watch it again, which was great. But yeah, I agree with Jason in that it didn't resolve everything, but I actually think it did a really good job. Same with the end of season 1 of setting up season 3. I think at a certain point during the season, I wasn't sure if a season 3 was something they were trying to prepare for or not. But I think what it's done is, I think the most important thing that I took from it, though, is that season 3 will be absolutely nothing like seasons 1 or 2, because there's such all the character dynamics have been blown to pieces from what we've seen from the first 2 seasons. So I feel like if they couldn't make a third season, at least I got some resolution. Some of the big questions were answered. But if they weren't coming out with a third season, I would be very upset.
Well, and speaking of a third season, we have quite a few questions about season 3 and what they're planning there. So I do want to go ahead and dive into our fan questions, all the burning questions everyone has after this finale. All right, let's get started. Our first question, did Lumen fake Gemma's death, or did she actually get into like an accident, die, and we saw a scenario where they rescued her, revived her, and then like had this plan to make Mark work there? Essentially, why is Gemma so important? Jason?
I'm going to give a weird answer to this, because knowing writers, knowing some TV writers, this kind of question where it's like the technical aspects of how the universe works and the technical answers to questions is, I think, the part that writers like thinking about the least, if that makes sense. Were either of you guys fans of the show Sherlock on the BBC show?
I've never seen it.
I've seen a couple episodes. Yeah, I enjoyed what I saw, for sure. Yeah.
There was an infamous thing where a season finale ended with Sherlock faking his death by jumping off of a building. And the fans spent the entire off-season speculating, how did he do that? Because the way they shot it, it appeared to be impossible. And then the season premiere of the next season, they actually made a joke of saying, well, we're not going to explain it. It happened somehow. Because it was kind of the writer saying, that doesn't matter. The point is that he did it. So like the exact details, like we're kind of not interested in that. We're about the emotional impact of his friends finding out he's still alive and all of that. I think with Severance, I don't know that they're ever going to come back and explain in exact fine detail how they pulled it off, because I agree, I can't necessarily make sense of it, and I can't make sense of if she willingly was part of this. It seems like an important point. It bothered me a little bit that they didn't explain it in this finale, and I don't know that they see that as an important thing to explain, if that makes sense.
I think that we'll see in season 3 that my personal theory is that they are responsible for her and Mark not being able to conceive, and I think that they probably recruited her in a sense and like offered her like, hey, we can help you become pregnant. So I think they probably staged the car accident. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, my headcanon is actually she was going to Lumen that night. I think she knew that Mark was going to be so into what he was doing. He was the one that said, why don't we give up? And saying that to your wife, that's that's not going to sit well. And I believe she took the call from Lumen, we saw Dr. Maurer at the clinic, and they said, listen, we have a miracle that we can do for you. Come and see us. And I think that's my headcanon, is that she willingly went into this not knowing the hell she was going in for.
Well, and what is so eerie is that Lumen has been involved in their lives from the moment they met. They were at a Lumen blood drive, and then they go to a Lumen fertility clinic. It's super eerie. I think that Gemma and Mark, perhaps their meeting was even orchestrated by Lumen. So we'll just have to see. All right, next.
With that,
sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Well, no, there was the fan theory with that Twilight Zone reference. And so that caused some people to suspect that maybe, well, she's like some sort of a clone or something, that they made her for this purpose, and she was briefly just let out on like a field trip, and that what she thinks of as her Addie life. Is that something that people actually believe, or is that kind of a fringe theory? Because it feels like that would be undermining, I don't know, the humanity of the character a little bit.
I agree.
I agree. I mentioned that theory in our breakdown. You're referring to the Twilight Zone mannequin episode and how it shared the title of After Hours. I do. I thought that was an interesting theory, but I don't think that we're going to find out that she's like a Lumen creation or anything. I personally am kind of hoping that the mannequin reference is to the Lumen CEOs, like their consciousnesses, the physical code of their existence being in those mannequins, but I could talk about that for hours. Speaking of clones and mannequins and whatnot, I do want to talk about the doppelgangers. Our next question is, what are the doppelgangers for? They're talking about the Watchers, the people that we saw in Woe's Hollow doing the pointing. I said that they looked 3D printed, like they were maybe creations of optics and design. Now I'm thinking that perhaps it is, we see the Watchers on the floor below the severed floor. They already share a physical appearance to the MDR crew. So my question is, Pete, what are the Watchers doing? And are we on the same page that was them in Woe's Hollow, perhaps wearing like what I described as like a 3D printed, like kind of like a flesh mask, essentially?
Good question. I hadn't thought of it that way. My thinking on it was that perhaps the Watchers were learning from almost MDRing them as they are doing their work. So sort of taking that in. So yeah, I love the thought that those 4 people that we saw in that one room watching them were actually at the Ortbo. I think that they are learning from them, perhaps to find a way to replace them in the Audi world in some way. I'm not sure.
Jason, what's going on with the Watchers? Do you have any theories?
I think there are certain details of the show where it's supposed to be just kind of a weird thing, and you're not supposed to know what it is. And I think they feel pressure sometimes to come back and explain. But especially in season 1, there's supposed to be this kind of surreal, whimsical quality to Lumen, where every time you saw what somebody was doing as their job, it made no sense. And that company, They had like the watering cans. It's like, we're doing watering cans today. And the joke is supposed to be, God only knows what these people get up to. Their company is so nonsense. It has nothing to do with profits or the bottom line. It's this weird cult. It's all the whims of these objectively crazy people. So I would totally be fine if they just left it as they have some in their weird ritualistic culture, some belief about having an alternate that watches you or something, and then never explaining it. And I think I sometimes ruin shows for myself by obsessively trying to figure out, well, that thing in the background, what was that? And then, sometimes you'll hear commentary and they're like, yeah, that thing, we left that back there on accident on the day of the shoot. We don't know what that was. That was like somebody's lunchbox. I think Jason, with the idea of a setting like this, the idea that some of it doesn't make sense, totally fine.
In a way, I kind of like that thinking, because one of the things that I'm reminded of when I watch this show, and it's funny, I find that I'm reminded more of it when I watch it with somebody else than just by myself, that there are some very comical moments in the show, and it's written like a comedy at times, just like the way Helly responded to James when he came in the room, and the third episode, or the final episode, had so many comedic moments. So maybe it is just a comedic thing. I mean, much like when Dylan was interviewing for the job at the door store, he was interviewing with a guy who looked just like him. That's hilarious.
True. Yeah.
So maybe it's just a comic element in there. I like that thought, Jason.
Well, and there's also the aspect of Severance, and I don't mean this as an insult. It's very Lovecraftian. There's a lot of stuff that's mysterious for, mystery's sake. The work is mysterious and important. So I guess there's a certain level of just some stuff in this show. It's just a little weird. It's just a little mysterious. But hey, the point of this video, I do want to try to see if we can have some answers to what's going on. And Jason, you perfectly described my entire job, which is essentially ruining shows for myself, because my entire career is looking in the background and going, what's that about? What's going on back there? So we do have 3 Irving related questions. I'm going to pile them all into one, and you guys just, go with it, answer whichever bit you want, because honestly, these are the ones that I really wanted to ask you guys, because I have no idea. One is, where is Irving going on that train? The other is, how did Irving know about the export hall? And who was Irving talking to on the payphone? Jason?
Those are all great questions. I actually thought when he got on the train, I thought that was Irving, the character, being gone from the show forever. I was actually very surprised that they were talking like John Turturro. He's like, no, I want to come back. There's plenty more for this character to do, because I thought that his act of rebellion in episode 4, that was like, no, he voluntarily erased himself, like knowing that he had to have known that was like death. You get fired, that's death, and then he goes out and he tries to find Bert, and in Bert's final act as a decent person, sends him out of town and he's gone. If he's coming back, I kind of don't know. I guess we never really understood what his job was, like where he was doing his own investigation into the company and all of that. So did he have a source he was speaking to? I don't know.
I think Irving was onto something. Like, personally, yeah, I think maybe Bert does have feelings for Irving, but I also kind of got the impression that Irving was getting really close to figuring something out. And so while he's pretending he's doing him a favor by sending him off, I think what we've seen with his research, his investigations, the phone calls with that mysterious person who I think might be Ragabi, I think we were seeing that Irving might have been about to burn this fucking place to the ground. Pete, what do you think? What's going on with Irving? And I'll say, I do think we'll totally see him back.
I think Irving's going to be a huge part of season 3. I think all his work, either he's the first reintegration attempt, because again, much like Mark was having the flashbacks and Petey was having the flashbacks, he might have been having them in a different way. I feel like he doesn't know everything that's going on to himself, but his outie almost feels like he's part of the whole Mind Collective, and that he's trying to find a way to bring this place down. So yeah, I Ragabi would make sense, in that, you know, maybe he was the first attempt, like I said, of reintegration, or not that it failed, but maybe it didn't happen all the way, or maybe it's part of the plan to make sure, you know, sort of like Mark had to accept being able to switch back and forth to rescue Gemma. Maybe he's had to accept being able to go back and forth to take down this company from the inside out. And I do think he's definitely coming back. I think he gave in a little too easily. I do have to say that I don't think we talked enough about how great Christopher Walken was in episode 9 when he said, "Let's go for a ride." I was thinking Sopranos. We all were, and that he was going down. But it's interesting, though, that Bert let him live. And I think that will be Bert's final mistake, because he will come back and play a major part in the ultimate demise of Lumen.
Yeah, I agree that Bert was probably instructed, and we know he's been with Lumen for a long time, he was probably instructed to take care of Irving. I don't think it's any coincidence that Drummond knew Irving was out of the house over at Bert's when he went into his apartment. Yeah, I totally think there's something going on there, and I do think that Irving perhaps will be working alongside the Audis, like Devin and Gemma and Cobell, in the next season. And maybe we'll see a situation where Mark and Helena have decided that they're not going to leave the severed floor. They want a life there. So that could create like a conflict there. And that brings me into our next question, which is, what are you guys thinking season 3 is going to be about? And our questioner says, I'm wondering if it'll be about the innies forcing the Audis to acknowledge that they are people, especially since Lumen specifically didn't want that. Lumen views an innie essentially as a tool, as a individual to essentially undergo all the pain in the world, so you don't have to. What are you thinking about that, Jason?
It's interesting because it seems like the way the show's set up is that this has to be a tragedy, ultimately, right? Because you basically set up a prison break show, because they are prisoners down there, where escaping means you die. There's not like a plausible way where you imagine, well, it could be like a throuple situation where Mark has a house that's severed and he walks over here, and he's married to Jim and he walks over here. It's like, well, the whole tension of the show from the very, very first episode is these people are trapped. Getting out means they have to erase themselves. At some point down the line, doesn't that have to happen? Like it's, and I get that this is, you know, I'm unable to imagine a happy ending, and maybe it's because I'm clearly not as good of a writer as the writers of this show are. But it seems like from the beginning they're setting it up as, no, this can only end one way. These people have to sacrifice themselves. And then the idea you would think is, okay, but their outer versions, who are all lacking something, will become more complete people due to what their innies did. Like you can imagine the outie version of Dylan becoming a better husband and father because he was reminded by talking to his wife, or if he gets to meet his innie, of what kind of man he used to be. And so it's like, okay, there's your happy ending, is not this having to come up with some cheap thing where everybody lives happily ever after, innie and outie, but where they all kind of come to terms with, we've blown up the company, we've ended the program, and then we've become better people because we can reintegrate the innie versions of ourselves, where we have each found a more heroic version of ourselves, a more rebellious version. It's just that it's a non-sad way for it to end. I can't fathom how it happens. Like no matter what circumstances, it seems like it's a tragedy for somebody, right?
Yeah, it's definitely I think you're right. The story is a tragedy. I don't see how it could have a truly happy ending. Pete, I wanted to ask you, we have a question here that says, while Mark was refining Gemma's 25 innies, and this is a big question that I had. Who or what are the other macrodats, is how they refer to the macrodata refinement team. What are they refining? You know, do their Audis also have like loved ones on the testing floor? Are they somewhere else in Lumen? You know, we hear Drummond say when Dylan resigns, we hear Drummond say to Milchick that our best refiner just resigned. So that made me think, okay, well, he actually is doing important work that Lumen cares about, because there for a little while after episode 7, when we found out that Gemma was, Mark's mission, and that seemed to be all Lumen cared about, I started to think, oh, well, Irving and Dylan and Helly and Petey, they were all just there to be co-workers, essentially serve as co-workers, to be this environment for Mark to do his work. We saw that they had no problem firing the team in the early part of this season. That made me feel like they were all replaceable and that Mark was the important one. But now with seeing that they have their own watchers, and like I said, Drummond was upset that Dylan was gone. Well, what are they refining? Are they also have like an innie from their life down below, or an outie, I could say? What is their work at Lumen?
That is really a very interesting, and I wonder if they. I throughout this entire season, I was thinking to myself, how far in advance have they thought about this from a writer's
Right.
perspective, right? But to me, perhaps they are. The thing that makes it a more difficult question is the fact that they brought in other refiners when they left at the beginning of this season, right? You had the guy, the 3 others that came in, which of course could be just plants, right? But I believe, my theory is that they are actually refining the Egans, the board, and that they're digging through and sort of also proving that you don't need that personal connection to be able to feel the things they feel when they see those numbers, but it's sort of proving that it could be a job, right? It could be done for others. You don't need a Gemma situation to make it work. And perhaps Dylan, was really good at what he did, and so, but I think the bigger question, the cool thing about the way this season started with the lie from Milchick about them being heroes to the world and all that, is we really don't know if this is the only Lumen facility in the world, right? They are constantly lied to. This is the tallest waterfall in the whole world. Milchick tells him that. We know that's not true at the Ortbo. So I really am starting to think that this is really the only place they do that. And so they are perhaps, like I said, my head is that refiners, they're trying to see if refiners can pull data from the board, from the existing Egan family tree.
Well, and that would explain why they have this whole doctrine of Kier, turning their employees into essentially these cult followers who love Kier and praise Kier. That could tie into the reconstruction, I guess, of the Egans. Jason, what are you thinking? What are they working on? I'm personally digging Pete's theory, but
sure. I hope that it is something so weird that we could sit here for 3 hours and throw out fan theories and would never guess it. I hope that it is something weirder and bigger than, because my main complaint about this season was that when it came down to what they were working on, it's like, well, it's just Severance. They're refining Severance. And it's like, well, I already knew about Severance. That was in the first episode. So it's like Severance is already a thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what's the mystery? Yeah, but what's the mysterious work that required you to be severed to do? It's like, well, no, it's still just Severance. We're refining Severance. I hope that we find out it's bigger and weirder, and I like the idea of Lumen being this giant sprawling company that makes everything and exists everywhere. Yeah. They have facilities all over the world. You heard that when they brought in those substitutes. I hope that we get hints at what they're working on is not all about this one woman who they've trapped, and I hope that it's something so big and so stupid and so weird that it just blows the roof off of everything. I hope that's the first thing the writers sit down and say, okay, we've gone deep on Mark and his life and Gemma. Now they're going to, when they're trying to take this company down, what are they trying to take down? What are they still doing? Because, for example, when Dylan consigns himself to go back to work, it's like, well, yeah, but to work on what? Isn't the Gemma thing over? it's like, well, no, there's got to be more stuff for them to do. And part of this is my selfishly wishing I could have just watched those 4 people doing an office thing for 10 straight seasons. I know that's not the show they made. I'm saying that I missed those 4 people together doing stuff because that never happened really ever in season 2.
Yeah.
You could almost see sort of an ending where the camera just keeps backing out and backing out and backing out, and it's 4 refiners in different places who have a Gemma situation, who have the support. I mean, we don't know how long Petey was there, right? We don't know if, and that's the thing that I keep coming back to is Mark is the important one, and I feel like they were supporting him and trying to, they surrounded him with people who made him better for whatever reason, and so to see that as sort of a worldwide plan with 100 different Gemma situations, that might be very interesting.
Well, there's also the theory that the 4 macrodata refiners represent the 4 tempers. So I guess you could say that Mark, his specific assignment at Lumen was the how the severance chip can be used to sever yourself from pain and from grief and things like that. Perhaps other, innies like Dylan could be tackling things like how the severance chip can impact your ambition. Or with Helly, we heard James say that, she's nothing like her old self. She's had, her whimsy stomped out of her by him. So perhaps her mission is like trying to find a way to restore your childhood self. So I think that Lumen, like you guys were both saying, I think they have many missions and many purposes they would like to see this technology utilized for. So Mark just may be one piece of that. And Pete, you just said Mark, he's super important. And that brings me into our next question, a question about, is Helly pregnant? I have a lot of thoughts on this that I want to get into, and I want to thank you both so much for joining me. Pete, it has been a pleasure covering this show with you all season. I can't wait to do it again for season 3. And Jason, it was such an honor to meet you. I also wanted to plug your book one more time. I'm starting to worry about the Black Box of Doom. You can find a link for that in the description below. All right, now let's talk about, is Helly pregnant? So yes, I do believe that Helena is definitely pregnant. We saw her and Mark have sex twice. We've got the baby Kier in the intro, and we know that Helena has never had luck with love, and that's why she is so interested in Mark and why she is jealous of her Innie finding love when she never could. Lumen is also ran by a lineage of Egan, so it is likely that her father is disappointed that she has yet to have a child to continue the Egan bloodline and control of Lumen. And that's where Mark comes in. Now, I actually had a theory earlier in the season that connects this whole thing to another question we got, that being, what was the point of the whole Dieter-Egan introduction? So I think the Kier and Dieter story was meant to mirror that of the Bible's Cain and Abel story, Cain and Abel being the twin sons of Adam and Eve. Not only were Kier and Dieter twins like Cain and Abel, but I think it's heavily implied that Kier killed his brother Dieter by bashing his head in with a rock, just like Cain did to Abel. Now, some biblical scholars, philosophers, and literary analysts have speculated that when Eve was seduced by Satan in the Garden of Eden, that she was actually being shown sex, essentially a way for man to create life. She then shared that knowledge with Adam. Now, this back-to-back sex is then theorized to have resulted in a pregnancy from both fathers, twins with different dads. The theory states that Cain was the son of the devil and that Abel would be the son of Adam. Now, this is actually a rare phenomenon. It's called heteropaternal superfecundation. This is where twins have different fathers, and it occurs when a female releases multiple eggs in the same menstrual cycle, and these eggs are fertilized by sperm from different men during separate sexual acts of intercourse within a short time frame. Sorry for the biology lesson. Now, Helly and Helena, they of course share a body, but theoretically, if someone can become pregnant with twins from 2 separate sexual encounters with 2 different men, then it's possible that Helly's/Helena's twins could be the result of not 1, but both of those sexual encounters with Mark, meaning that one child could have been deceived when Helena, the deceiving devil, was at the wheel, and the other child conceived while Helly was at the wheel, Helly being the innocent one who was shown sex for the first time by Mark, who in this scenario would be Eve because he was shown sex by the devil, Helena. But hey, that's just my theory. I know you guys don't like it, but I like it. It's my video, so I wanted to share it. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure covering this show with you guys. I cannot wait to cover season 3. If you're new here, please do feel free to subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.